Well, speaking of unhinged, Jim, I'm going to ask you about a topic that a lot of people have sent in questions about, as I'm sure you're aware. And I'm sure you're up to date on most of what's going on, but let me preemptively play this here at the top of it.
This is a CNN Cornette News Network update. What has crazy Uncle Dave tweeted this time? And now over to Brian and Jim.
So once again, you and Dave Meltzer are going at it on social media and beyond. And a lot of people want to know what's going on. Let me stop this. All right, Jim, well, now the music is over.
Thankfully.
The latest episode.
Now it's time to face the music. Uncle Dave, go ahead.
I was going to say, I guess it's the latest episode in your feud between you and Dave Meltzer, for lack of a better term.
Christ. This is the only feud I've ever been in where I was the side that was just trying not to have a fucking feud because I'm fucking fed up with it. But he won't leave it alone, will he? And people got upset at me when I actually unblocked him on Twitter the other day because I didn't want to hear his dreck about his 17-star matches with Twinkle Toes and his fucking comedy crew. I blocked him a long time ago, but I unblocked him so that I could tweet him, "Hey, Dave, why do you feel the need to slander me behind my back and then continue to email me about innocuous random shit like we're still friends? What the fuck is the matter with you?" And I had a bunch of people say, "Well, why couldn't you have done that privately with this guy instead of doing it on the internet?" Because I've done it privately and it won't take. He's a jilted lover. He's a stalker. And it doesn't seem to fucking sink into Dave Meltzer's head that we are not friends anymore. I have told him privately through email on at least 2, possibly 3 occasions to fuck the fuck off and leave me alone. But he doesn't get it. You have been aware of this since you have been apprised of the situation every time I've had to tell him this. What the fuck is the matter with you, Dave? Why are you still speaking to me like I haven't told you that we are fucking done and will never speak again? I'm expecting to come home sometime and see a rabbit boiling in a pot on my stove. Now, here's the thing, and we're going to read some of this, but here's the thing. It's fine if Dave wants to knock me and fucking bury me and slander me and take up for his little friends in the Lollipop Guild and all of that stuff. I don't care. But he keeps at the same time interacting with me like that we still speak, and I have not told him in a variety of ways over several instances to fuck off. I'm not speaking to him anymore. We're not friends. He's a backstabbing prick, and I don't want to have anything to do with him. You and I have talked, Brian, about why can he not understand this? He, of all people, should know, after we've talked to each other for over 35 years, when I'm working and when I'm shooting. Is in any way the things that I have said to him that you are aware of, does that sound like a work that I'm just... No, I'm sure we'll settle this one of these days, Dave. I'm just pissed right now. Or does it sound like, fuck you, leave me alone, you had your chance, you blew it, we're not friends anymore, I don't care, I don't want to talk to you?
It sounds like that, and I think anyone who knows you would know what that sounds like, and that's why, to me, I must admit, and I have been privy to a lot of things, it has always made me laugh when after all this, he still has emailed you time and time again, as if none of this is going on.
Apropos of nothing, randomly out of the blue, I will give you, and somebody said, publish the emails. Well, I don't know how to fucking tweet an email, but I'll read it to you. Hold on here. Let me find it. It's down here somewhere. This he sent me on June the 18th. Unsolicited. We had been doing, you and I on the show, our little deal where you read a program from some place, some date, and I try to guess where and when it was, right, by the people on it. We had been doing that game. And one of the cards had a Sam Steamboat Jr. It was from the 1950s. And we were, Sam Steamboat Jr.? Blah, blah, blah. That would be the original Sam Steamboat. So I get up one more Friday, June the 18th. No, this was sent 6 p.m. So I get up Saturday morning and I see an email from Dave Meltzer. Just sending you this because somebody sent me your guess the card thing. Not that he would have been listening. The reason Sammy Steamboat used the name Sammy Steamboat Jr. is in fact that there was a famous surfing legend, Sammy Steamboat, but it was his father. I learned that a few decades ago when Sammy Steamboat passed away. I called Lou Thez, who trained Sammy Steamboat, and he goes, no, it's the father, who was like royalty there. When Thez would go to Hawaii as champion, Sammy Steamboat had the title of King of the Beach, and all the wrestlers knew him. Everyone in the culture knew him. Thez and some others would train Sammy Jr. in real wrestling, and he was great at it, state high school champ and all that. And the father would teach Lou surfing in return. Lou considered Sammy Sr. one of his best friends. Ripper Collins took the King name in the 60s when he feuded with Steamboat because you had this pale, fat, blonde American mocking Sammy Steamboat's famous father. That's the email. Okay. That's the kind of emails you used to get from Dave. I used to get from Dave before I had cussed him out, told him he was a piece of shit and a backstabbing prick and to leave me the fuck alone. But that's the kind of emails he sends me in private. But you and I, Brian, we were surprised this week when suddenly we were both mentioned in the Observer. I get mentions every once in a while. You don't get them so often. But the same guy who decided to email me a jovial note about Sammy Steamboat trivia decided to write about, Brian, you and I in the Observer this week about the fucking guy hitting the ring on AEW television again. That everybody lost their fucking minds about because it's been so long since anybody gave a shit to jump up in the ring, whether to attack someone they were mad at or even to become a star on television, since even the people in the ring that are supposed to be are not stars on TV anymore. It's been so long since anybody's seen it, everybody lost their fucking minds. It used to happen on a fucking weekly, if not multi-weekly occasion in almost every territory, and with worse intent and possibly and definitely worse outcomes. But some fat fucking guy that fancies himself a wrestler and wanted to be involved and be on TV jumped up on the apron of the ring, unarmed, and got taken down by the goddamn ring announcer before he even got in. Some idiot wanting to be on TV, live TV. You see it in news fucking broadcasts, people trying to mug and be on TV. After the fact, the guy then tweeted, I did it for you, Jim Cornette and Brian Last. He also tweeted Vince Russo. He did it for him. I bet you he tweeted the goddamn fucking morning show in town that he did it for them because he was trying to get attention from everybody. But Dave, to his credit, immediately when that story was going around, tweeted, no way Cornette approved of this or would ever have approved of this. But the problem was, Brian, he tweeted that before he forgot one thing. He forgot to ask Twinkle Toes McFingerbang, his mentor, his hero, his idol, his soulmate, his life partner, his best friend, whatever the fuck he is, he forgot to get Twinkle Toes' opinion. Because once Twinkle Toes decided to take the opportunity to stir up his low IQ followers, because let's face it, anybody that fucking thinks that Harpo Fingerfuck is a goddamn real legitimate professional wrestler has to be a complete moron. He got his low IQ followers all riled up by blaming it on me so I could be a bad person so that my critiques of his bad emoting, as you have termed it, would have less cachet with the people. See, remember now, between the Bucks and Olivier and their whole inner circle, They've got their heads so far up their asses trying to sniff their own farts that they can't really see the daylight to know what's going on. So they think that they legitimately are great wrestlers and that I'm the one that's fucked up. So they try to get the people on that. Once that Uncle Dave hears that Twinkle Toes has changed their story, then he feels the need to go back and make sure that he makes Twinkle Toes happy by expressing the same opinion. Have I pretty much related the chain of events here in the correct chronological order?
For the most part. I mean, we don't know why what got into the Observer got into the Observer. We could certainly assume there were certain words that have been said by the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega that all of a sudden Dave is saying that.
The talking points?
Yeah, all of a sudden Shock Jock is in the mix, and that came right from that camp. And I think, I don't want to say too much about what I think right now, but I think Dave really, really cares what the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega think.
Oh, that's an understatement. And everybody who's known Dave for 30 years, 35 years, 25 years, whatever, we've all tried to toss our suggestions in. What has gone on with him? Is it a lot of people say he's on the payroll. You wouldn't act this way, this rabid for money. This is a personal thing. And I don't think he's been paid. I don't even know that it's that he knows that the only people that really subscribe to the Observer anymore, or the people at his main audience, likes this shit because everybody else has given up on wrestling. And if they're not going to spend any money on wrestling, they're not going to spend any money reading about it. So he's trying to keep his subscriber base. But I think, honestly, for whatever reason, I'm not explaining it, I'm just relating it. I think he just is so thrilled that these people have taken him into their bosom and he's become one of them after all these years, and the cool kids like him, and he's socially awkward to begin with, not like me. I hate people. I'm not social at all. Dave is socially awkward. He doesn't know how to talk to people or be around people. So they've taken him to their bosom. And I guess it's, like a fucking starving man given a cheeseburger, or the guy that gets out of prison given an ugly girl, or whatever. You're going to town on it. But let me read you what was in the Observer this week. The fan who hopped the rail at the beginning of the Chris Jericho MJF segment and Jericho threw a few punches at later went on Twitter and claimed he did it for Jim Cornette and Vince Russo. In a moment, it brought up the ugliest part of Shock Jock's social media and mental illness all in one package. Both Cornette and Russo make it a habit of burying AEW. Cornette because the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega's success hit a bad nerve because it proved times changed and he was out of touch. And the more success they had, the more he had to yell and scream that they weren't. Oh, my God. He can't get it. I don't care if they sell 5 billion tickets. They're a fucking embarrassment. It's shitty booking. It's shitty, fake, silly wrestling. And he can't stand it that I've been telling him this for 5 fucking years. Because it shits on what he likes. Russo was just mad because Khan would never hire him and he could pull the rating stuff for people who don't understand how television has changed in the last 10 years. Anyway, you have this guy looking for attention from both Cornette and Russo, which is an irony in and of itself, saying he wanted to show these guys dressing up and playing wrestlers were pussies, so he wanted to attack them. Got news for you. I'm not the first person that brought up the fact that these guys are dressing up playing wrestlers and look like a bunch of pussies either. It's obvious if you have vision. The guy was nuts, but he was encouraged by Cornette's hate speech and wanted to impress Cornette, who promptly, figuratively told him to go to hell, that he doesn't condone anyone jumping the barricades. So that does put Cornette over Donald Trump, the guy he's usually compared to, because Trump would have wished the guy well. I have so many similarities to fucking Donald Trump. See, he's just trying to piss me off.
That's the one that gets, well, I don't know if you want me to say anything yet, so I'll just...
Go ahead.
That's the one that fucking gets me, because he says, because people compare him. Dave compares you all the time. to Donald Trump. And again,
Yes.
I'll say my opinion at the end, but this all comes from the fact that Dave short-circuited because you didn't accept the wrestlers he anointed. And that's all it is. Kenny Omega doesn't get into the Observer Hall of Fame if Dave doesn't give him all those stars. Dave anointed the Bucks and Omega. And for you to reject them the way you have means you're rejecting Dave. And Dave can't fucking take it. And a lot of his friends think the same fucking thing. But when you do the Trump thing, that pisses me off because everyone knows what side we were on politically. And just because you don't like that we don't like, or specifically you that you don't like, the type of wrestling that he thinks everyone should like, that makes you Trump like. He emailed you. I remember one of the previous emails. I actually have it here. He emailed you previously the same week that he compared you to Donald Trump.
Yes.
He emailed you thanking you for all your political talk. And that's when I was like, this is bullshit. Dave always says he's not working a gimmick on social media. He's working a fucking gimmick.
He's working a gimmick on social media.
He fucking trashes Jim on his message board, in his newsletter, and on Twitter. And then he fucking tries to message you about thanking you. It was a thank you note. Thank you for all your political talk.
You're making a difference there with your platform. Anyway, and by the way, I didn't tell the American public you were stolen from, you were lied to, you've been cheated. And if you don't go to the Capitol and take back our country, then the fucking economy will crash and communism will take over and our lives as we know it will come to an end. That's encouraging violence. When the president of the United States says that's encouraging violence. When I tell somebody what they can see with their own eyes, that this fucking twinkle toes fucking bullshit is phony bad wrestling, that's my opinion and the opinion of a lot of other people, such as all the millions of people that ain't watching this shit. And that's what Dave can't stand. Anyway, I continue with his writing. Look, Cornette never wanted anyone to jump the rail and the guy to screw loose, but the guy went out and told everyone he did it to impress Cornette and to a lesser extent Russo. Well, therefore, fucking lock Jodie Foster up. Are they responsible because one of their listeners is a nutcase? No. Will either reflect on the fact that even though the guy was a nut, they were the ones who influenced him by their own over-the-top stuff? Of course not. Omega wrote, is it finally time to assume some responsibility and dial the online persona back a bit? Your low IQ man-children, this is Omega talking about our fans, have evolved from parroting your comments to actually acting out in attempted violence. That's what got Dave to start this. Oh, I'm sorry. I used the wrong talking point. Cornette responded by agreeing the guy was a nut, and they agree on that one thing, and then said two clarifications, which this was my tweet to Twinkle Toes. Unlike you, I've seen violence in an arena, and this wasn't it. And secondly, looking at your supporters, I wouldn't toss the phrase low IQ around. Of course, that's exactly what I'm going to say, because he's calling our fans stupid because we don't like silly fake wrestling. Fuck you. You fucking curly-haired piece of shit. Continuing with Dave. One thing for certain, Jim Cornette is among the last people who should talk about IQ levels of supporters, because legitimately that's the one thing he has in common with Vince Russo is some of the dumbest supporters, which does reflect on their childish shock jock attempts to rile people up for attention. Besides our polls and our surveys, where we have a very highly educated and well-earning audience, we also have an audience of people that like wrestling, not this bullshit. That's why they say the same things, because people with eyes and that have seen wrestling and that don't have an agenda can understand this is not good. So that makes them the stupid people. That's what Dave Meltzer says. I wouldn't talk about IQ levels of supporters if I was him. Some of the dumbest supporters. That's a quote. Fuck you, Dave, on behalf of the cult of Cornette and anybody else that likes wrestling, including many of your longtime friends who can't stand this bullshit and won't even watch it anymore, the business they were in. Fuck you. So, continuing with Dave's writing, the only difference is that Cornette is actually so entertaining people still talk about him, while Russo is almost completely ignored at this point. Well, you got a point there. Brian Last tried to deflect from the subject, saying that Omega should cut bait with Don Callis for how he treated women behind the scenes in Impact, and said bad things only count when they're done by people who criticize your bad in-ring emoting. Last hasn't cut bait with Cornette, so that probably wasn't the tack to take. I don't understand what that means. Is that a sentence that makes sense?
Is this a paragraph that makes sense?
No. Omega then responded to Cornette, and remember, this is where Twinkle Toes then said, well, I'll take the high road, and people were like, well, at least that was nice of him. No, he's a fucking smarmy, smart-aleck piece of shit. He probably wrote this while he was fondling himself thinking about Riho matches. Hey, Jim, I think you're one of the greatest wrestling historians going, and I enjoyed your work with Dark Side of the Ring. For whatever it's worth, I sincerely hope that you're remembered for your positive contributions to the wrestling business. That's all. And of course, I didn't write back because he fucking gave up. However, Dave continues, nobody can take away from Cornette that he's an entertaining talker and is great on Dark Side. But that doesn't take away that his catering to the lowest common denominator did lead to nut jobs having irrational hate on people for no reason other than he riled them up. And ultimately, that's what created the situation in question. No, a guy that wanted to be a fucking star and figured none of these people probably going to be able to hurt me jumped up on the apron of the ring and the fucking ring announcer took him down.
During Jericho and MJF.
During Jericho and MJF.
Not during, like, you know, fucking Orange Cassidy and a bunch of fucking idiots. During Jericho and MJF.
Or the Cucamonga Kids, or Twinkle Toes, or Brandon Cutlet, or Dwarf Dong Sucker, or whatever. Anyway, again, lowest common denominator, nut jobs, irrational hate on people for no reason. If people do hate any of the AEW roster, it's because they are depriving them of actual legitimate wrestling that they used to enjoy. It's not irrational. Geez, I can't stand that shit. That's pretty rational. If you're looking at an AEW television program, the rational expression would be, what the fuck are these idiots doing? But anyway, continuing and closing with Dave, the sad part of all of this, and this really is the sad part, is that all the attention created by this situation that big stars like Cornette and Omega and Matt Hardy and many others were talking about this lowlife is an encouragement to others to follow suit, and the best thing would be for everyone to just pretend he doesn't exist and for people like me not to have to cover them. So did anyone learn a thing from this? Perhaps, but not the people who needed to. Let me explain this again for Dave, because I know he's listening now, since apparently he's hanging on our every word. Go back, people out there, and Dave yourself, and listen to the last time you were a guest on this program. What was it? It was about 3 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer. I tried to get him to just even say, okay, just the dick spot. Just tell people that you think that Joey Ryan, because this was before he got outed, is throwing people around by his dick is not phony and silly. Just tell people that that's phony and silly and that's stupid. And it shouldn't be on TV, but it works for his audience. He wouldn't come off of a thing on this, on Twinkle Toes, or on the Wrestling the Invisible Man, or the sex doll, or the, you know, all of the dance routines. He wouldn't knock it. But did I say fuck you to him on the air, Brian? Did I fucking ream him out? Did I call him a piece of shit and argue with him? No, I didn't, because we'd been friends for a while, and I couldn't understand why an old friend of mine that used to know wrestling and used to love wrestling and watched all the wrestling in the world and talked sense, I couldn't understand what had gone on with him. But I laughed about it as much as possible. I said, all right, well, and I still maintained that Dave really cared about what he was doing, cared about being right when it came to reporting shit, cared about being right when it came to historical pieces and the obituaries or the tributes, and that he really, over all these years, had done an incredible job applying himself toward trying to document wrestling, and he didn't mean to lead people astray or mislead him with information. He corrected things when he knew he got them wrong. That's the Dave that I knew for 30 years and Dave that I was taken up for, not just when he was on this program, but I said it many times when other people like Bruce Pritchard, now let's face it, you can't believe Bruce Pritchard if his tongue is fucking notarized, or Eric Bischoff, who's a complete fucking idiot, all these other people that wanted to knock him and discredit Dave because they wanted to rewrite history and not be blamed for their own stupid things they were involved in. I took up for Dave Meltzer because he was telling the truth. And I would tell people that. And finally, it got to the point where he kept going over the moon about Twinkle Toes and AEW and the Hardley Boys and the whole 9 yards that I had to I said, hey, weed's legal in California. I can't explain this guy that I've known for so long suddenly having this goddamn opinion, but still, he takes his business seriously and he doesn't lie to people on purpose. I just can't explain his opinions. Is that not what I was saying for a long, long time?
You, for a long time, longer than people realize, because we started hearing from people who would see things on the message board or little shots in the Observer. He started taking shots at you, talking about you being out of touch and how you have nothing to contribute. Yeah. Whenever anyone would say anything about you, it would...
Along about the first AEW pay-per-view is when this started, didn't it? When I had said, I'll wait to see what they come up with, but I can't believe that any of this is going to be in any way serious. They're going to have to prove me wrong.
Now, I will say, and I think this is irrational, but from the bits I've heard from Dave over the last couple of years, he seems... I don't know if he wants an apology or what he's waiting for, but the fact that AEW didn't go out of business in the spring of 2020, like he says you predicted...
Yo, he'll beat that one to death. And when we saw the first couple of TVs, I said, my God, they'll be off the air in 6 months. This is fucking horrible. And the viewership was fucking horrible. I didn't realize, I should have, that the TNT doesn't care whether the program is any good or not. And that's the ratings that they're willing to accept these days in television. So he was wrong. They weren't off the air in 6 months. Okay, that means that TNT likes a bad television program, and they don't care if they get over 1 million people. But then, so I was wrong about everything. No, it's still a bad television program. It's bad wrestling. It's wrestling written for kids by kids. And for Dave going around saying, well, this is such incredible long-term storytelling and such incredible subtle psychology that this wrestling artist puts in his performances, when I'm over here with 40 years experience in the business saying this sucks and here's why and explaining why, it made them all look bad. So he had to start knocking me behind my back. Not even in the Observer sometimes, but on the message boards or then on Twitter. Then I had to fucking finally tell him, look, what the fuck? We've been friends for all this time, but because I am telling the truth and giving my opinion about what I'm seeing from these asswipes that I knew were going to be a bunch of jackoffs from the beginning. I knew they couldn't play this straight. I knew they couldn't be serious because they don't have the fucking talent. And now they have ruined the opportunity for a serious wrestling program to ever be on network TV in our lifetimes. So fuck them. I'm going to fucking tell everybody how much they suck. And we've been talking like this, me and him, for 30 years. He knows me. He has to fucking say what they say. He's just making it up for attention. He's a shock jock. He doesn't really think this. How the fuck am I that good of a fucking actor that I can say all this shit without meaning it? You fucking idiot. So I finally had to tell Dave, you know what? I've had enough. I've had enough of you knocking me behind my back, knocking me on the internet, telling people I'm out of touch. Hey, Dave, what's the pizza order? What would you like for pizza for lunch? Well, if Cornette had stayed in touch with pizza, he would be a great person to order. But since he didn't stay in touch with the modern aspects of pizza, we shouldn't ask him.
Ask Mike Tenay.
Ask Mike Tenay. And you couldn't tie him in a chair and pay him to watch AEW. So this is where we're at. I finally had to fucking send Dave a personal email telling him, fuck you. I'm tired of you knocking me and telling people I don't know what I'm talking about on the internet and every chance you get when I've done nothing but take up for you and defend you for what I believed was true. I'm sick and fed up with you slandering the Midnight Express. I told him this a couple or 3 times on Twitter and finally an email, saying the Young Bucks are the modern Midnight Express. The Midnight Express did not get into this thing between me and you, and there's no reason to talk about them like that. I told him that a couple of times. And finally, I said, fuck it. You like these guys so much? Fine, you backstabbing prick. Fuck you. Love on them all you want. We're done. And then he still wouldn't stop sending me these fucking emails, so I had to tell him again. I think I sent you the second one. We're fucking done, asshole, backstabber, turncoat, traitor. I was not the one knocking you. You were knocking me. I laughed about your fucking weird wrestling taste, but I defended you as a person, and you proceed to, because you're so in love with Twinkle Toes' ball sack and the Hardley Boys' fucking taints, that you're going to stab me in the back and slander me all over the place. I'll tell you again publicly now, Dave, because I've told you privately and it don't take. Fuck you. We're done. I don't ever want to speak to you again or see you. I think you've gone completely insane. So do many of your old friends. I don't know what's going on in your fucking life. Are you on medication you need to be off of? Are you off of some you need to be on? But get this through your head. It ain't a gimmick. It ain't shock jock. You ought to know better than anybody. It's me. I don't like them, and now I don't like you. And I'm going to continue to say whatever the fuck I want to say about their shitty wrestling, because they're sabotaging a business I spent 40 years in and used to have a lot of affection for. I am not advocating anybody commit violence and mayhem toward them, because they're doing a pretty good enough job of crippling each other on their own just by trying to have these shitty wrestling matches. But to try to fucking blame me because some drunk wannabe delusional asshole jumps up on the ring, doesn't even make it in, because I tell people that their wrestling sucks, fuck you. You know why the guy jumped up in the ring? Because everybody can play. Nothing about this is in any way serious. It's all a fucking clown show. Everybody can take part. Nobody's serious, and nobody's really getting hurt, except for all the people that really get hurt because we don't know how to work. That right there is what got Sad Sack to jump up in the ring and be part of the fucking show. Otherwise, Dave, from me to you after all these years, please take this to heart. Fuck you. Leave me alone. Turn blue. And drop over. And by the way, here's something else. What have we not heard, Brian, about the aftermath of this fan jumping and trying to jump in the ring? What's the one thing you would think that you would hear that we haven't heard yet?
That he was arrested?
What did they charge him with? Was he arrested? Was he taken to jail? What was he charged with? When is his hearing? When is his court date? He was on Twitter the next day, fucking say, I did it for you, Jim. I did it for you, Russo. I did it for you, mailman down the street. And he's been cutting promos and crowing about it. Does that sound like a guy that's been suitably chastened for his actions? Did they arrest him? Did he take the ride in the police car? Did he go to jail? Did they charge him with assault, with trespass, with disorderly conduct, with all the charges that you can charge somebody in that situation with? Did they throw the book at him? I haven't heard a goddamn word. If they expect to cut that kind of behavior off at the knees, that's what they ought to be doing, not complaining because a guy with a podcast that reaches almost as many people as their pissy amateur hour television show does, telling people how much it sucks. How about when somebody does fuck up and cross the line, throw the book at them and make them sorry about it? Just like one of those clowns they just sentenced to 8 months in prison for the insurrection on January the 6th. The prosecutors were asking for 18 months. They should have gotten more. This guy wasn't even violent. I hope there's some 20-year sentences for the people that beat the police with the fucking flagpoles. However, you hear about that because that is going to discourage these low-life cretins, these ignoramuses from doing shit like that again, since that fits a good part of the AEW clientele, not our fans, the smart ones, but those dumb supporters, the low IQ supporters of the other folks over there. That would discourage them from doing some shit. Did they arrest him? Did he take a ride in a cop car? Was he handcuffed? Did they throw the book at him? Does he have a court date? What's he facing? How bad are they fucking that guy's life up? Because I guarantee you, everybody that I ever had experience with that jumped in the ring, whether it was in my match or somebody else's, not only did they get their ass handed to them in various ways, but they took the ride to the fucking county jail, and they got booked, and they got fingerprinted, and they got photographed, and they had to come up with bail, and they had to go back to court and think more about whether they ought to have jumped in that ring or not, or taken that swing at that fucking wrestler. Some of them then would turn around and file lawsuits against us, and we'd all have a merry time in court. But I don't hear anything otherwise than Justin Roberts snatched him. There was a video of 10 seconds of him dragging him away from ringside, and he's back on Twitter the next day crowing about it. You mean to tell me that this goddamn AEW as a wrestling promotion is so inexperienced and so amateurish that they don't even know to arrest the marks that jump in the ring? Somebody needs to enlighten us on what's happening to this guy. Anyway, that's what's happened lately with our old friend Uncle Dave Meltzer, who is a jilted, spurned paramour and can't apparently get through his head when somebody has told him in this many words and many more, fuck you, you backstabbing prick. You fucking slander me when I've taken up for you for years with everybody trying to knock you. You want to fucking kiss and love on these fucking guys? Feel free to. You don't need to speak to me at all. I do not miss you. As a matter of fact, I forgot to block him again on Twitter after I tweeted him, but I should block him again. But he will continue running his dick licker every time that he gets a chance about me because he's mad that I won't apologize to him about the way that I've spoken about his friends. And he gets his talking points from the people that he gets everything else from, his friends at All Petite Wrestling. Your final comments on Uncle Dave.
Well, there's a lot there. I will say, I've been someone on this show typically, even going back to the Bruce Pritchard episode where I fought with Bruce Pritchard on the air because Dave was right. Bruce was lying. Bruce wasn't telling the truth. I've defended Dave numerous times. But I have to say, especially because I've been privy to other things and I talk to other people and I see other things, Dave's credibility for me is at an all-time low, especially when it comes to modern wrestling analysis. And I see sometimes when people go, oh, you just kiss AEW's ass, and it'll say, well, you don't read The Observer. I read The Observer. I've read every issue of The Observer. Dave will say if he thinks something is wrong based on, remember when he said that he thought they had a women viewer problem because he heard from 3 women in his life about, there's no real...
Well, now, wait a minute. He doesn't have 3 women in his life.
Well, he said that.
From 3 random women.
But I don't really pay any attention to his modern analysis of wrestling because he rates things a lot higher than I would, typically with certain people. And also, he doesn't call out the bad stuff. Chris Jericho could go out there and do a universally hated segment. He won't say anything about it. The Young Bucks, when they do bad stuff, when the booking doesn't hold up, none of this stuff. He loves the Young Bucks comedy. I'm sorry. Dave has become the 60-year-old man going to the K-pop concerts, trying to fit in. He thinks we don't fit in because we're not trying to dress like a couple 20-year-olds and going to the K-pop concert. But we're actually living in reality. And it really bothers me when he attacks the listeners, because he's a fucking listener. But when he attacks the fucking listeners as low IQ, look, every audience, and we said this before, every audience has their crazies. Everyone. Dr. Ruth has fucking crazy fans. Everyone has them.
4 out of 10 people in America are fucking crazy.
But you attack our audience, and then, what he wrote in The Observer about our audience. Hey, listen, when you are fucking embarrassed about your own message board, and everyone involved with your fucking website is embarrassed by your message board, and you talk about it, don't talk about our people. Go look at your own fucking shop, Dave. And, you want to talk about low IQ, the Observer Awards, which, Dave holds those things up because, they get covered in some of the Japanese magazines and different things. It's a small percentage of the Observer readers that vote on them. You want to talk low IQ? I got nothing wrong with Brian Alvarez. Always gotten along with him, haven't spoken to him in many years, not a shot at him. But his book, 100 Things WWE Fans Should Know and Do Before They Die,
What?
Was voted Book of the Year over Andre the Giant's biography.
Wait a minute.
And Buddy
what?
Rogers' biography.
Wait, what? I didn't even know that was a thing. But the Buddy Rogers biography by Hornbaker and the Andre biography by Pat LaPrade and goddamn it, I've blanked out on his name.
Bertrand Hebert.
Bertrand Hebert.
A great man.
That got beat out by 100 Things WWF Fans Need to Do Before They Die by Brian Alvarez.
The high IQ voters for the awards decided to look past the two landmark publications of Andre the Giant and Buddy Rogers biographies and focus on the 100 things WWE fans should know and do before they die. Again, not a shot at Brian Alvarez. I hope the book did well. Obviously, it probably did. But you mean to tell me this high IQ audience voted for that book over, again, two landmark publications in terms of research and wrestling history? So don't give me the IQ.
We're not saying he shouldn't have written it. We're saying that it's ridiculous to praise that book above these two incredible books about real stars because it's a goddamn potato chip wrestling book that you read on the toilet.
Everything shifts for this narrative for what the Bucks say. Dave never said anything bad about your run in Ring of Honor until the Bucks started opening their mouths a few years after that. Never said a word. Defended your run in Ring of Honor.
Well, that's because he knew what was going on at the time.
Yeah, but now it's a different story. Now you should have dropped everything and pushed the Bucks because look at the business they did a few years later. I mean, it's completely insane. When you talk about I should have cut bait with Jim, I'm not sure exactly for what. I'm guessing that means Dave should have cut bait with Jim because he was friends with him until Jim said, enough. You keep running your mouth behind my back about me.
But he said you should cut bait with me because you said Omega should cut bait with Don Callis. Don Callis, well, I don't know what we can say, what we can't say, but I've never been accused of the things Don Callis was accused of.
And by the way, Dave didn't say I was wrong. And Dave didn't say I was wrong. And
look, he has the story. He just won't run it.
Well, that's the thing. Everyone has a story.
They can't run it because of the...
Every wrestling journalist out there in America and Canada has the fucking story about what went on in Impact. Everyone knows the whole story. There are text messages out there. There are documents out there. There's a lot about the Asper family and the investigation. The whole story's out there.
I like the gimmick investigator that was really working, supposedly an independent investigator, but was working for the company that was doing the investigation. That's great wrestling.
So again, everyone has the story. It's just I'm willing to say what I know here on the air. But Dave didn't say I was wrong about that. But don't give me the cut bait thing, because you want to go down a list of people Dave should have cut bait with at one point or another? Fuck, you had Jericho write a poem for Art Barr when he died. Art Barr was in Mexico because he couldn't get work in the States because he was a rapist. Don't give me a fucking lecture on morals, Dave.
Well, now, wait a minute. He was not a rapist.
Yes, he was.
He was only statutorially.
No, that's the misconception. The woman literally said she did not want to have sex, and Art Barr's defense was, I thought she wanted to have sex, just not here.
Okay.
So no.
Then in that case, I take back my caveat. I thought it was just a statutory situation.
But again, it all comes down to you can cut bait. Dave has lost the concept, and Dave has lost the plot, and Dave is in a midlife crisis in a wrestling bubble. That's scary. He is completely in love with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. He anointed them, and if you have a problem with them, he comes after you. He goes after people on Twitter in the most disrespectful, condescending, clown-like way, and he somehow thinks that behavior is acceptable. He has no idea how to interact with people on a normal level. And I've heard lots of old audio of Dave. On various shows, we've played old audio of Dave. He's not the same fucking guy anymore.
It's not, and...
he could barely get through a sentence.
Anyway.
So I'm not going to listen to him tell me about what's in touch or out of touch, or who's a low IQ audience and who's a high IQ audience, because he's just as embarrassed about his people. Trust me on that. I'm not going to listen to any of this. Dave, go kiss their ass in private. If you're going to do it publicly, we're going to fire back. Ridiculous. You've been sending Jim these fucking emails for months. Every time you rip him publicly, and then you send him this, and then he goes on Twitter the other day and says, I was just being nice. Oh, so basically everything you're doing is a work to get fucking love from the Bucks and Omega, and then when they're not around, that's when you send him the nice emails thanking him for his political coverage and giving him wrestling information. Get the fuck out of here.
When I actually finally said publicly on Twitter, hey, why do you keep sending me the fucking nice emails like we still speak and then slander me in public? Well, I just thought you'd like it. It was trivia and I talked to Luthez. Yeah, I'd like it from somebody that I like, but not from you, you backstabbing turncoat prick. That's it. So I'm sorry. And I was willing to overlook that you liked these fucking people and joke about it. Even in all evidence to the contrary, that you think that they're good wrestlers, I was willing to just joke about that and move on and not knock you, Dave. But you chose to do this out of touch thing. Like, oh my God, he's so out of touch. People started eating cow shit off the road 5 years ago and liking it, but he refuses to. He's out of touch.
Yeah, do me a favor. I've listened to Dave on his show. Dave, don't call someone out of touch. You have no idea what's going on in the world outside of wrestling. You have zero idea of the real world outside of wrestling. Do not call someone out of touch.
I don't know if I wish I didn't know what was going on in the world outside right now, to be honest with you. It'd probably be ignorance is bliss. In that case, Dave is ecstatic. But anyway, that's the fucking problem. He just felt the need to, I wonder if his mother was still alive, if she said, boy, who's that shitty wrestler on TV, if he would turn on her. If she didn't like old Twinkle Toes, how much does this mean to him? That, oh my God, they're telling the truth about my favorite wrestlers, that they suck, even though I've said that they're great. So now I must destroy them all. Fuck. I don't know. I can't explain it. This is your show.
It is crazy. I'll just say it is crazy, though. And for anyone out there, look, Jim's my friend. For some reason, we get along. Who knows why?
I have no idea.
What the fuck?
Really, sometimes you're hard to take.
Hey, speak for yourself. But what I'm going to say is, I certainly have seen you have issues with people, and I know what causes the issues, and I know the problems. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you may take things a little too far.
Sometimes I do.
With that said, and all things being equal, and I call out Jim on air and off air when I think he's wrong, this was Dave, not Jim. Jim, I was talking to him, he was biting his tongue while Dave was ripping him time after time after time. This is the one case of a friendship blowing up where I could specifically say, I don't think Jim was at fault here. And I would say
tried. So. My hands are clean. I gave it an effort. It's been going on. I reached that point where I've had all I can stands. I can't stands no more. And I unloaded, but it took a while to get there. And then the thing that's been most frustrating for me is I've never cussed anybody like that, either verbally or in writing, and told them what I thought of them. And that I never wanted to speak to them again. And we were completely done as any type of friends or acquaintances. And just have them no-sell it. And just act like it did later. It didn't happen.
Costanza gets fired from work and just shows up the next day like nothing's wrong.
What? Why shouldn't I be here? That's the thing I can't understand. He acts like I never said these things to him. And then when I see him slandering me in public again, and say something else, it's like, what? You're upset?
No, then it's you're immature and you're like Trump. And basically all of these things, Dave has an inability to look in the mirror about a lot of things. And that was said to me by one of his friends, actually. Dave has an inability to look in the mirror. But, Jim, let's move on. Let's get one or two questions before we wrap up this shit show.
Now we're both in a bad mood.